Good evening, you're listening to The Truth Tank and I'm your host, The Tank. If this is your first time listening to The Truth Tank, a big welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. This episode was meant to come out about a month ago. If you're wondering why there's been a bit of a gap in episodes, it's because I've had some more technical issues with the computer I've had for 10 months. The refurbished 2019 MacBook Pro 16-inch computer I brought last April has decided to shit itself. I was in the final stage of editing back in, when was it? It was probably mid to late February. It would have been late February. Wednesday night I was editing as I do. I saved it. I had about half an hour to edit of this current episode. Went to turn my computer on Thursday morning, had a hissing sound, didn't boot up, and it kept shutting down. Closed the lid, tried it again. This just kept doing it over and over and over again. It's done this before a few times, but never this bad. It did it late last year, and I had to basically reset everything and start again. So it was doing it again a couple of weeks ago. I had that sinking feeling that something was wrong, and yeah, boy, was I fucking right. Took it to a Mac specialist. It took him about 3 weeks to find the problem. Turns out there wasn't just one issue, there was two. There was an issue installing the software or a current software update. Every time I tried to update the software in the past, I'd get a unknown error message, and it would take three or four attempts to actually install properly. So there was that issue. The big problem, however, was the memory fault in the logic board, which I was told was going to cost well over or north of $1,000 to fix, and I only paid $980 for the computer in the first place. Didn't seem like a very good deal to me. I spent a couple of weeks trying to find another one and got a MacBook Air, a 2023 model with an M2 chip, 15.3 inches, doesn't have the storage capacity or all the bells and whistles of the Pro, but so far it's been pretty fucking good. It doesn't have a fan in it, which means it's probably going to overheat one day and blow up. But the good news is I'll be able to record and I won't have to worry about the fan noise like the other one, because I've noticed that while editing. I couldn't quite hear it when I was recording, but when you edit you can hear this fan noise in the background, which was coming from the computer. So you won't have to worry about fan noise or as much background noise as the last probably 10 episodes that I've recorded on that piece of shit. So anyways, I'm getting back on track. I'm making my way through the episodes. Luckily, they could save the data. I did a data transfer, and all the episodes and scripts and stuff I was working on have been saved, which is the good news. It cost me $250 to get a data transfer, as well as $149 to look at the thing and tell me that something that I already knew, that it was fucked. One of the biggest anxiety-inducing parts of the whole experience was not knowing if I was going to lose all my data. All the 4 months of podcasts I had recorded, partly edited, as well as future scripts and past scripts and episodes, and all the promos and stuff I used were all on that hard drive. So that's all been saved, which is good, which has been transferred over to the new computer and several hard drives. I'm just making my way through editing, so there might be a bit of a lag in between episodes coming out. So most of them have been recorded, so I should be able to keep up. Then I've got a couple more I need to record. Which brings me to another big announcement. The Live Communism is delayed again, unfortunately. It was meant to come out the 25th of March 2025, but unfortunately due to this massive setback and me also being completely broke, having to buy a new computer, I've had to delay and push back the release of The Live Communism. I'm looking at probably a late May, probably middle of the year release at this stage. It's been a massive fucking setback, to be honest, having this computer just completely just up and shit itself, which is annoying because this is not really what I had planned for 2025. I had it Live Communism done. I was on a roll with getting podcasts out. and now this, and now I haven't had a episode out in about a month. The good news is I've got some more reading material for the Lie of Communism. I'm reading some biographies and some more historical documents written by Lenin and Trotsky, and we'll be including them in the podcast. Now I've got this extra time to read and to get that stuff done. That's going to be included in the show, so it should be even better than I was hoping. You just have to be a little more patient, unfortunately. It pisses me off a lot because I wanted it out finally. It's been now 3 years since I started it, so yeah, it's a bit of a setback. But anyway, onwards and upwards, they say. So if the intro to this sounds a little different, it's because this has been recorded 2 months after the episode you're about to hear. Which brings me into the topic of tonight's show. On tonight's show, we're going to be looking at all the conspiracy theories surrounding the LA wildfires. The plausible, the ridiculous, and the in-between. So without further ado, let's get into tonight's show. This is episode 69 of The Truth Tank. Palm Trees and Conspiracies, the LA Wildfires.
Hi guys, I'm Courtney.
And I'm Lisa.
And we are the hosts of The Book of the Dead, a true crime podcast based out of New Jersey, where we tell you about the most obscure cases that you may have never heard of. So join us in the Book of the Dead library for another chapter of the Book of the Dead wherever you get your podcasts. Bye guys.
I do have a soft spot for LA. I went there just over 10 years ago now. I went to Santa Monica, stayed in West Hollywood, did all the touristy shit, went to Universal Studios, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, went to the hockey, saw the LA Kings versus the Chicago Blackhawks at the Staples Center. It was the Staples Center back then. Went shopping at Sears and a couple of other places. Had a great time. Went to Santa Monica, as I think I just said. Went to the pier. Went to the Santa Monica Mall, or whatever it was called. That was pretty cool. Walked along the beach. Met some interesting characters. So LA has this soft spot in my heart. So it's a bit confronting seeing the Santa Monica pier covered in black smoke. It was even stranger seeing the orange glow of the fires reflecting in the background. It was pretty surreal. I didn't think the fire could get that far down the coast. I live in an area with a very similar climate to California. It actually has a pretty similar layout to Los Angeles. Hills in the background, flat urban sprawl, and then the beach. We have a lot of bushfires. A few years ago, the Black Saturday fires, the catastrophic bushfires we had in Australia, where I was, you could see the glow of the fire coming over the hills. I don't live too far away from the hills. I live in the foothills. It's still suburbia, but it's a couple of kilometres away from the real hills. It's about a 5-10 minute drive. Similar layout, very windy one-way roads to get up and out of the hills, which is pretty dangerous when you consider they are prone to fire. And during the Black Saturday fires, the fires had been burning for a week or two. It was a Sunday night, very hot. I remember walking out the front. You could just see the hills from behind my house and just seeing the glowing embers at 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday, making the horizon just glow this unnatural colour. It was, it's pretty bright, so you could see a lot, and it's pretty disturbing. The fire has never made it down as far as I am or got to the city. I don't think it really can because it's a bit far out and there's not a lot of vegetation in between. But then again, neither was Los Angeles, so stranger things have happened. The Monday morning I went to the gym and I remember just waking up and smelling smoke, going outside, smelling smoke, going in my car, getting to the gym, which is a couple of k's down the road, and just working out, breathing the smoke in. The smoke was so thick over the city. I'd never seen anything like that before. And the smoke lingered for nearly a week. The air quality was some of the worst in the world outside of China. It was gross. We had to open all the windows and stuff at the gym, and it still wasn't enough. The fans were on, and had a pretty sluggish workout because obviously you're out of breath. I was doing squats trying to suck air in, and just getting the smoke. You kind of forgot about it after a while, but then you got reminded of it because it had some pretty weird effects. You did feel a little lightheaded sometimes. You got I had a bit of a headache after the workout, and just trying to go into a room of the house that had the least amount of smoke you could smell was pretty hard. You had to have the fans on. You had to pretty much close the windows because the air was so bad outside. It's very surreal. It's the only time I've ever experienced that, so I can only imagine what that would have been like in Los Angeles. It would have been 100 times worse. It's a very, very surreal experience. Where I live, like California, if we don't have any rainfall for about a month, those hills that get nice and green during winter, they turn dry and brown pretty fucking quick. It's about a month and they're pretty much brown and dried and dead looking, as does most of the hills in the bush area. A couple of years ago when we had a lot of rain, we didn't really have much of a summer. We had heaps of higher than average rainfall. The hills were green all the way through winter to December, which is, very unusual. They stayed green nearly all year. They dried out a bit in February and March, but then came back. And it was nice. I've never seen the hills that green. This year, on the other hand, we haven't had much rain. I think the last good rainfall we had was August, which was the end of winter. And even that was lower than it usually is. We've had a couple of on and off days of rain, but it rains for a couple of minutes. The ground barely gets wet before it dries out again. Within 2 hours, the ground is pretty much bone dry. Anything living just sucks all the water out of the ground. We've had water shortages and stuff like that as well, so I can completely sympathise. This year, the hills were pretty green. They looked okay. End of August, they were still relatively green. September, getting dry. By October, they were pretty much dried out. November, they looked like they hadn't had rain in a year. December, everything is dry and dead. And same goes for January. So with anything that happens around the world now, you can be sure a torrent of conspiracy theories aren't too far behind. And I love conspiracy theories. I've always been a conspiracy theorist, or as I like to refer to myself, a conspiracy realist. And that's what we're going to be having a look at on this episode, are some of the conspiracy theories surrounding the LA wildfires. And there are a ton of them. One of my favourite conspiracies is the energy weapons. Apparently someone started the fires with targeted energy weapons, and houses that were painted blue, or anyone wearing blue, wasn't affected. Don't know if there'll be too many willing volunteers to test that theory. By that logic, LA Rams and Chargers fans should be okay. Just wear your home jersey and put the fires out, it won't touch you. I completely believe in energy weapons. The government has to have been working on some type of particle accelerator gun or a rail gun or something like that. But to use it on your own population to start a fire where you could have just paid some lunatic just to light a fire would be far cheaper and much harder to trace. LA's a pretty populated area. To have some dude pull up in a white van with what you could assume would have to be pretty fucking big to be an energy weapon to store the amount of energy needed to fire a projectile or a laser beam with what we currently know would probably be a sizable weapon. To see someone walking around just shooting the grass, even if it was away from a population area, you can see someone taking a piss on a hike using Google Maps these days. Some sleuth somewhere would find some government agent guy with a fucking energy gun shooting it off into the bush, where there's far easier and more practical ways that leave less evidence and traceability than a ray gun or an energy weapon. While I'm completely open to the theory, the blue thing is a bit weird. I don't know a hell of a lot about this theory, but apparently direct energy weapons don't affect the colour blue. I'm not sure why that is. I might have to look into that and do another weekly tank on it. So that would mean direct energy weapons wouldn't affect me because I love blue. I always wear blue. I got blue Timberlands for Christmas. I'm obsessed with blue Nikes, dark blue jeans. I should be alright. So maybe there is some truth to the energy weapons not affecting the colour blue. I know that was a big theory with the Maui wildfires as well. I'm going to have to look into that. The thing I don't like about conspiracy theories or certain conspiracies is there's not a lot of thought to the overall story or the narrative of the conspiracy theory. Someone will say something like, it's the government using direct energy weapons. Why? When it comes to a conspiracy, the first thing I always ask is why. What would be the motivation? What would someone get out of it? Why would you create billions of dollars worth of damage? Possibly even $1 trillion worth of damage. For what? For an investment. I mean, anyone who has owned a business or has some type of business knowledge knows that the investment return is usually like a good investment is usually considered 30%. So if you're going to burn down all of these houses in Los Angeles, some of them, massively wealthy suburbs and areas like Malibu, the Palisades, lots of rich and famous people lost their houses, and you can assume that they're probably well over $1 million. Why? So you have to spend just as much money to rebuild them, or to take it over by the government, because technically the government doesn't own the land. You do, even if you don't have a house on it. Yeah, maybe I'm 100% wrong, but yeah, I like to have a bit more validity in my conspiracy theories before I go believing everything I hear. And direct energy weapons, I think, can probably be well and truly discarded this time around. It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense in this situation because, like I said at the start of the show, California, where I live, are very similar, very prone to fire, as is most of Australia. I mean, some places you literally drop a smouldering cigarette butt and, like 30 minutes later you have a raging inferno that's burning down half the fucking bush. Lightning strikes are another thing. When you live in Australia, you really realise how easy things can burn and how quickly it can catch on. One of the causes of the Black Saturday fires was lightning strikes deep in the bush that no one could get to. Another reason was broken beer bottles or broken glass bottles by the side of the road. Some cunt he's driving in the bush, chucks his glass bottle out of the window, it lands in the bush. It doesn't even have to break, it can be an intact bottle or a broken bottle or shards of glass. The sun gets so intense, especially in the afternoon between the 12 to 4 o'clock. 2 to 3 o'clock is the fucking worst time here. It is so fucking hot. Like you go out in the sun and you can fucking feel your skin heating up and starting to cook in about 5 minutes. We've all burnt leaves using a magnifying glass when we were kids. It's the same exact principle. Sun hits the glass magnifies the rays of the sun, shoots it out the other side onto dry leaves, which there are billions of dry leaves in the bush, and then you get a fire by the side of the road or a grass fire or something like that. A few years ago, my brother and his soon-to-be father-in-law, he lives up in the hills. They were going home. They got a phone call from a friend of theirs who said he's got a huge grass fire on his property. He had a farm. Is up by a chocolate factory. They had to go through a police road check. The cop said, "I'm probably going to have to fine you," which he didn't. But he said, "I can't stop you." They pretty much broke the speed limit. They went up to this guy's house, got some hoses and put this grass fire out. The reason I'm telling you this is that the grass fire I'm pretty sure it was deliberately lit. The fire started about 2 or 2:30, because by about 5 or 5:30, when they got the phone call from this guy, huge areas had already burned. This is kilometers away from where it started, or it was a fair distance away from where it started. So these two go up, they put the fire out. It took them, a couple of hours, and they saved this guy's house. And that was a grass fire, and it didn't take much to start. A lot of the deliberately lit fires in Australia, it's literally somebody with like a cigarette lighter, and they just light a few things on fire. Everything is so dry, it goes up pretty fucking quick. And it wouldn't take much in a place like LA or California to do exactly the same thing. This grass fire spread really quickly. It was only a couple of meters away from the guy's house, and they managed to put it out. If my brother and his future father-in-law weren't there, that guy wouldn't have had a house in 20 minutes' time. So it shows you just how devastating and quick these fires can move. And this wasn't a particularly big one either. This wasn't like a massive bushfire. This is like a scrub fire, it was called. It was not the category of a bushfire. It was basically just burning dry grass and going through fields. The other theory I think is more credible is bad actors or foreign agents, even climate terrorists. I mean, what better way to derail the incoming president than starting fires in the second most populated city in the US? Probably the most overcrowded city in the US after New York. Maybe is it? I don't know. I think New York might be more densely packed, but LA has the hills, and everybody loves to build in the hills. You have an area that's prone to fire with a whole bunch of tinder boxes built, like 20 meters apart, 30 meters apart, and everybody in LA has a car. What is LA famous for, apart from movies and glitz and glamour and all that shit? There's more cars than people. I think, 17 to 18 million people and 35 million cars. Everyone has, on average, 2 to 2.5 cars per house, or per member of each house, All those actors have those big expensive cars. So not only do you have tinderboxes and wildfire, you have gas lines. Everything is made to burn. Everything's artificial now. Everything's plastic or dipped in a chemical that if you fart too close to it, it explodes or catches fire. And everybody has a bomb in the driveway. In this case, multiple. So that those cars blow up. It sets the electrics off in the gates and stuff like that, and burns down the entire neighborhood pretty fucking quick. One thing I did notice just by looking at obviously the news footage, because I wasn't there, a lot of hedges and people's fences didn't get completely destroyed. In some cases, they were the only part of the house that was still standing, which is really interesting. I mean, hedge plants are usually pretty good with the heat, but I mean, that kind of fire, it shows you how quickly the fire spread and burnt, because it doesn't seem to have burnt or damaged the fences and gates and stuff like that. They seem to be like the only thing that was untouched. The cars are all blown up and destroyed along with the house. But some flat areas, that wasn't the case, which is a very similar thing to what happened here all those years ago. One thing I don't think can be completely ruled out are bad actors and foreign agents. I can imagine the Iranians might be capable of something like that. I'm not saying they're involved in any type of way, but you could picture a foreign agent doing something like that. I mean, it's ecological sabotage, it's ecological terrorism. Another thing, could some delusional woke climate terrorist, not even a climate terrorist, a climate supporter, could they be so disillusioned at the future that they end up doing something like this? Maybe they wanted to start a fire to prove a point and got out of control, which happens here all the time. Fires get out of control really fucking quick. And like the grass fire story, you're talking about a time frame of like 2 hours had burnt so many acres. You take that in a setting like Los Angeles, where there's hills and gullies and the Santa Ana winds that happen all the time at that time of year, I should say. It's a recipe for disaster. That was a huge factor with the Black Saturday fires. They were all pushed by these unseasonal winds. There were some really powerful winds that were coming from the north of the country. Because the north of the country at that time of year is prone to cyclones and flooding and lots of tropical storms. Some of that wind, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on it, got pushed down, fanned the fires, and then they turned into an unstoppable inferno, which is what we have seen in Los Angeles. The other thing that keeps coming up is the ill-preparedness of the fire department and the cuts by the government, which are also a recipe for disaster. A lot of disasters are preventable by better management. One of my favourite metaphors, the Titanic, is the perfect example of this. The iceberg isn't really the thing that sinks the Titanic. Yeah, obviously it hit the ship, it broke it apart, but the flaws and the chain reaction of events that led to the sinking were in play years before the Titanic was on course for an iceberg. The iceberg, in my opinion, kind of proves the point. One big one, the poor design of the ship, the expansion joint being the old V shape and not the V with the horseshoe at the end of it, so the expansion from the top deck and the lower decks, that energy had to go through the circular part, then up through the V. The coal shortages and the miners' strikes, that didn't help. The fire in the engine in the coal stack that had been burning for months before the ship had set sail had warped the metal. Hot metal, freezing cold ocean, not a good mix. And it's not even big things like that, like poor design of the rudder, the expansion joint, or the coal. It's also the little things that led to the disaster, such as bringing a captain out of retirement who was probably past his best, ordering the ship to speed up and go faster so they could, stroke their egos and arrive in New York 2 days early to try to outclass and outpace the other steamliner companies, so they could stroke their egos and say, oh, look how fast we are. We arrived in New York 2 or 3 days before you did. Ha ha ha, we're so good. We're the future. The ship was traveling too fast. When it saw the iceberg, it couldn't turn because the rudder was too small. And then the other fatal flaw is the guy, one of the officers turned up for work and he had an off feeling about it, and he ended up getting fired or told to stay at home. He had the keys to the binoculars. And the binoculars, I think, were either on the ship or not on the ship, but the box was locked and they couldn't get to them. And maybe someone should have broken the box open, which would have been one of the defining factors in seeing the iceberg before it was too late and all these other mismanaged components aligned in the perfect storm scenario that caused the ship to hit the iceberg. If the crow's nest had have had the binoculars, maybe not, they might have been able to see the iceberg before the naked eye, which would have allowed those crucial few miles of correction of the ship where they possibly could have missed it. And then you have the other uncontrollable factors such as the environment. It was a calm night. If it was a rougher night, the crow's nest would have been able to see the water breaking around the iceberg. Then you can go even deeper than that and go back, 13,000 years to when the iceberg was created in a glacier from what was it, up near Nova Scotia. The massive ice wall, the glacier got pushed down over millions of years, sheared off, ended up in the ocean and slowly drifted into a line with the Titanic. It's a perfect recipe of all elements coming together, just like when you bake a cake. I think environmental disasters are a similar thing. You have the right fire, the right wind, the right setting, equals a disaster on an unprecedented scale. So what are some of the big issues around the funding cuts? Well, one of the biggest issues has been cutting fire to the fire departments, which is never a good idea anywhere in the world. Even if the fire department doesn't seem to do a lot for 10 years, there's going to be that time where they make up for it. Same as the case of the Black Saturday fires. The country fire service, the CFS, they don't have the most high-tech tools, but they are pretty well equipped. They're run by a volunteer organisation. My uncle used to be the logistics manager of the CFS where I am. Through him, I know a little bit about how some of the behind-the-scenes stuff works. He has a pretty high-tech weather app on his phone. He's always tracking it. Every Christmas, he was always on duty. He'd have to leave sometimes because there would be a fire. He would be the first person that gets called. My dad and his sisters, they share it around every 3 years, so it was up at their place, which is up in the hills. We were driving up there. This is when the fires were going on. This is, 2019? It was stinking fucking hot. It was 38 degrees, whatever it was. We're driving up, we saw the water bombers flying overhead. You could smell smoke, you could kind of see the smoke in the background. It was one of the worst Christmases environment-wise we've had in a really long time. We haven't had fires since then, I don't think, around Christmas. There's always the spot fires and stuff like that, but not to this scale. It's either that Christmas or another one. They wanted to send this helicopter up. I think it was the Christmas after, because the Christmas before had been so dramatic. There was a little bit of questioning by the powers that be. Do we send the water bombers up? Do we send the helicopter? And these planes were like smaller planes that had a small load of, like a kind of like a Cessna kind of thing. They looked like an old World War II fighter plane, but with a kind of like a bomb door that was full of water. And during the Black Saturday fires, some people were pretty hesitant to commit resources to certain areas because of cost, or they were going to waste too much water in an area that wasn't populated, and they had to kind of like triage the situation and use the water and the available resources to the more populated areas of the bush. In other words, they had to let some areas burn in order to save others. And management these days, no one wants to get in trouble, no one wants to lose their job, no one wants to take responsibility. So there was this hesitancy of sending out the water bombers because they cost quite a lot of money. Every time you put one in the air, it's like $20,000 or something like that. It's thousands of dollars for clearance and the fuel, then to load it up because the water's not free. Get the pilots, pay the pilots, send it out, and they can only do one run at a time. And I remember seeing the water bomber coming over. You could see it dump the water in the distance, so the fire was probably pretty close, and they got to drench areas before the fire gets to it if it's already kind of getting out of control, which is like the fire retardant I've seen on the news being dropped all over people's houses in the hills, except this was water, not retardant. So anyway, it was one Christmas, I think it was the one after that, so they'd gotten in trouble for not committing enough resources. So I think a manager or someone was a bit eager, and they wanted to send up a water helicopter, basically a giant bucket on a string to drop water, and it was for a quote-unquote house fire. Well, it turned out someone had burnt the turkey in a barbecue outside, and it had sent black smoke everywhere. The house didn't burn down or anything, and someone was going to commit $25,000 water bombing helicopter to dump water on this barbecue. Now, fortunately, they rang him and he cancelled it and said, no, just send a crew up there. And then the homeowner ended up ringing back or something like that and not needing the fire department anyway. So it shows you, management, communication, these things can get crossed, and there's a lot of fucking grey zones that come into play. It's not as simple as just stick a fucking water bomber in the sky and you're going to put the fire out. So funding cuts in the LA fires are same thing. Then you have the diversity over logic and logistics. You have the 3 lesbian fire chiefs, one of which she was the fire chief who, she said, well, the fire manager, I can't remember what title she is, but she's like the head of the Metro Fire Department, and she was saying, oh, don't you want someone like us turning up at your door when there's a fire? It's like, no, I don't. I want someone who can fucking carry me out of a fucking burning house. She made those comments which have become infamous now. Oh, well, I don't want to hear this argument. Like, we always hear that, well, what if you can't take my husband out of the house if he's unconscious? And she said something along the lines of, well, he shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place, which is fucking just the most irresponsible woke thing you could fucking say. So if you're a larger fellow and you're unconscious on the ground, you just have to die of smoke inhalation or burn to death, in other words. So if this overweight lesbian can't meet the physical requirements to carry a fully grown man out of a burning building, well, that's your bad luck. The fire department where I am isn't that woke. They have a physical requirement to be a firefighter. It also relies on a intellectual component as well. My brother, the one that put out the fire, he always wanted to be a firefighter. He met the physical requirements but not the academic ones, which is a bit unfair because he would have been a great firefighter. But there's also the scientific aspect of it as well. But the problem in Australia is you have to be overqualified to do anything. You need a fucking degree to be a barista pretty much in some places. There's this obsession with being overqualified and overeducated for pretty much every position, and just in case you do one little thing wrong, whatever happened to learning on the job. I've learnt far more on the job than I ever have in a classroom. And my cousin, she's been a CFS firefighter for fucking like 15, 20 years. Country fire service is different. It's more so about putting fires out than it is going into burning buildings. But the Metropolitan Fire Chief in Los Angeles, in this case, was wrong. So her argument is people want people like them turning up to rescue them from a burning house or building. Now, I'm a pretty large man. I want someone that can carry my unconscious, over 100 kilo body out of a fucking burning building. If I can't do it myself, I want that firefighter to be able to fucking drag me out. And I don't think, a 5'2", 70 kilo petite woman could do that no matter how strong they are. You've got to carry the equipment as well as basically dead weight, which I think is just a very irresponsible thing to say. And comments like that really show how infectious this woke shit has become. It's infecting the fire departments. It's like saying, oh, well, don't you want the police officers turning up that look like you? That's also a very individual thing too. So in other words, you want purple-haired people with piercings wearing badges to come and rescue you. And if you get robbed or shot or carjacked, that's your own fault. Policing, fire departments and ambulances, wokeness doesn't mix. The environment, Mother Nature does not care about woke politics at all. If anything, it just proved that all these funding cuts were completely useless. They didn't save any money because they've ended up costing billions more than anyone in the government could ever imagine. Mother Nature is a cruel and unforgiving mistress and will make you pay for mistakes. And will make you pay a high fucking price for your mistakes. The other situation that doesn't really help is the mayor fucked off to go to Ghana for the inauguration of a president somewhere that no one's ever heard about. Now, what the fuck were you doing going out of the state? She knew ahead of time about the weather conditions and that there was a high possibility of fire spreading due to the winds, yet still chose to go. Once again, Black Saturday fires, where was our Prime Minister? He was on a fucking beach in Hawaii somewhere, relaxing, drinking cocktails. He copped shit over. I don't know how he wasn't fucking fired or voted out. At that point, his excuse was, oh, well, my family deserves a holiday too, not while the country's on fire. If you're the man in charge of or woman in charge of a country, Your duty is not to your fucking family, it's to the millions of people that voted you into the office, and that goes double for the people that didn't vote you into office. You're responsible for everybody in the country, and you can't just take time off with your family because they want a family vacation in Hawaii. You need to be responsible. If you can't meet those responsibilities, please leave and get someone in that can. To have the mayor fuck off when she knew there was a huge danger of fire is completely irresponsible and unforgivable. And when she was questioned about it, she goes blank at a press conference. And then you have the governor, Governor Newsom. That guy's a slimy piece of shit. He gets caught lying to a woman on national television, claims he's on a phone call with President Biden. His phone screen gets flashed to the camera and you can see he wasn't even on a call. This is the same thing that happened in November with Kamala Harris, claiming to be on the phone with a donor or something like that, and she's going, "Oh my God, thank you for your donation, this is amazing," and she accidentally flashes the phone to the camera. Well, we hope it was an accident, and it's got a lock screen. I mean, don't these politicians know that these screens are pretty bright and visible? Everyone has these, all these elite people have these giant fucking 8-inch phone screens that you can see from space. Do they not realise that when you're on a call, the screen lights up in a very specific way? It has that big, green slide to answer, and it has the microphone buttons on the iPhone. It's very obvious that you're on the phone to somebody. I guess they either don't care or can't remember that if you flash your phone screen to a camera, there's like a 90% chance that everyone's going to be able to see your phone screen, and they're going to work out that you're not actually on a phone call, and it's a lock screen. And Newsom did the same thing that Kamala did on election night, and he's paying the price for it. That woman laid into him, saying how it was his fault. They're the people that are in charge of Los Angeles, so the responsibility has to fall on these two shoulders. And it's not a good look where the people in charge lie out of their ass. The other thing that I kind of find funny is Mr. quote-unquote climate warrior, Mr. DiCaprio, chartering his private jet in the middle of a statewide disaster, getting his 25-year-old girlfriend and his dad and his partner, getting them on a private plane. So it was 4 or 5 of them on a plane, chartering his private plane, burning a whole bunch of fossil fuels and flying to Mexico to escape the inferno. Well done, Mr. Climate Warrior. You really give a fuck about the environment. I love DiCaprio. He's one of my favourite actors. He has been since I was a kid. I've lost massive amounts of respect for him. He's always on social media claiming how he fights for the environment and for the climate. His bio on Instagram says actor, activist, climate warrior. He goes all around the world talking about things he pretty much knows nothing about. He's not a climate scientist. You're a fucking actor. Act. Let climate scientists do their fucking job. He goes all around the world talking about how it's our fault that we're killing the planet. We should be driving electric cars that none of us can afford. You shouldn't be going on planes because they cause too much CO2 emissions. If you want to go overseas on a holiday, you should fucking swim. Celebrities like DiCaprio love to lecture people on how it's their fault that the climate is in the shape that it is. And yet this quote-unquote climate warrior fucks off to another country in his private jet, which has been proven by science, by actual science, to emit massive amounts of CO2. I think for the size and output of the vehicle, private jets are like one of the biggest emitters of carbon dioxide emissions. I think they pump out more CO2 than like a bigger plane on average to its size or something like that. Very poor form, Mr. DiCaprio. I mean, James Woods, Steven Guttenberg, Dick Van Dyke are there trying to help people and put fires out, and you're getting your barely legal girlfriend and fucking off to Mexico. That's the thing about him. He's turned 50 recently, or is turning 50. He's still sticking to the younger girlfriend. It's like, mate, you're 50 fucking years old. You're not married. You don't have any kids. There's something fucking wrong with him. You like the younger women. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. But when you're that age, it's now become creepy. When you're 40, not so much of an issue. When you're 50 and you're still pretending you're 25 yourself, maybe he's got a bit of a Peter Pan complex, and you're still going out with the younger women, it says a lot about him. And when you look at that, with all those old photos of him at the PDD parties, DiCaprio's looking like a bit of a freak. So back to the fires. Another conspiracy theory for the fires, I'm not sure if this is such a conspiracy theory, is that crackheads and homeless people have been lighting fires. There's been a few videos on social media showing citizens' arrests of homeless people with a torch lighting fires. And I think in a couple of cases, these people have been released by the police because they couldn't charge them because they didn't have the torch in their hand or something like that. And I heard, was it on Tucker Carlson's podcast, that 70% or 60% of fires in Los Angeles are started by homeless people and crackheads. I'm paraphrasing here, but the guest he had on his show was saying crackheads are drawn to destructive behaviors because crack is a destructive drug, so they like to destroy things and start fires when they're high as a kite. But that's the only problem with the online world now. There's so much rumours and spreading of misinformation. Who knows what to fucking believe? All of these scenarios could be true, or they could all be fake. So who the fuck knows? I've seen fake photos online of the Hollywood sign on fire, which didn't happen. That's the other thing here with the media. The fires were covered pretty much non-stop for about 3 days, and now I haven't heard a fucking thing about them. And this is about 2 weeks on at time of recording. There's not even an update at the end of the main news bulletin to give us a little update on how the fires are going or if they've spread. The last time I heard, which was like about a week ago, they were heading towards the Beverly Hills area, but I haven't heard anything else. Most of the news about the wildfires I've heard has been President Trump touring the disaster zone and the withholding of aid unless Gavin Newsom releases more water or something like that. When I was preparing for the show and I did a Google search, a lot of what I found was relating to conspiracy theories and the spread of misinformation and stuff like that. But I guess all in all, it comes down to Mother Nature will make you pay. The Santa Ana winds are a real thing that happen every year in Los Angeles. The other conspiracy theory I haven't mentioned yet was the LA 2.0 theory. This is a very interesting one. The main outline of the conspiracy theory: the fires were deliberately lit to basically clear the slate so they can make a smart city, or LA 2.0, which is, I think, may actually be a real thing, or it might actually be a plan of some sort, which we'll get into a bit later. It's an interesting theory. I'm not sure how true it is. I think there might have been a LA 2.0 plan or some type of proposal by the government, but I'm not too sure about it. Don't think it's that credible, to be honest, but it's interesting nonetheless, and we'll get into that a little later. So let's look into how the fire started and what are some other conspiracy theories, some of the main conspiracy theories around the fires. So this article comes from thehollywoodreporter.com, titled "How the LA Wildfires Are Becoming a Conspiracy Theorist's Haven and a Political Weapon." It's by Stephen Zichik, I think that's how you pronounce his name, published January 9th, 2025. The fires are causing massive physical devastation. The social media response to them could be destroying democracy. Okay, interesting. When Hurricane Milton and Helene ravaged the southeast in the fall, FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell said she feared that a whole new level of disinformation was taking hold. And unfortunately, that is a massive symptom of social media and the internet, is no one knows what the fuck to believe anymore. Even if all of these conspiracy theories are true to some degree or have some truth to them, no one's going to believe them because nobody believes anything anymore because it comes from the internet. You can't trust legacy media because they've just been proven time after time to lie out of their ass. Same with politicians that serve the people, but they seem to have forgotten that. So who the fuck knows what to believe? And I don't think we'll ever really know how the fire started. We probably will to a degree, but whether people believe it or not is a different story. Or use the Occam's razor principle. The simplest solution is often the correct one. Logic is also one that I use to determine a lot of my decision making. What's the most logical course of action? This is a quote from Miss Criswell. "It's absolutely the worst I've ever seen," she told reporters, as conspiracy theorists claimed their favourite agency was suddenly absolutely detaining locals in tents, only saving trans people, not saving white people, demanding all aid money be repaid with interest, and other blatant absurdities spread in online posts. I think if any of them were actually true, there'd be a bit of evidence for them now. Everyone's got a phone and a reporting device in their pocket. A lot of conspiracy theories you do hear online are complete bullshit, and I wish people would just take a little bit more time either coming up with them or looking into them. Why is the most important one I always look at. What, where, and when. But why is the most important thing I always look at. Why does someone think this is happening? Or, why would the government do this? Why would some group or agency do this? Yada, yada, yada. And I think there's a lot of nuts out there who just want a soapbox. Someone reads online somewhere, they're only saving trans people and detaining locals in tents and they've got FEMA camps everywhere. Then some idiot reads that, doesn't fact check or bother to do any independent critical thinking whatsoever or research, takes that as truth, then basically like a baton race, passes it on down the line until it's arrived at Joe Blow a month later and he's verbatim reciting this shit as gospel. There would be some proof to any of those claims, and that's the big issue with this, is people don't believe conspiracy theories. And conspiracy theories aren't theories. There are a lot of conspiracies that happen every day, and that takes the validity off of real tangible conspiracies like JFK, Roswell, any of the older classic conspiracies, and it's not even older either. Like there's a lot of modern conspiracies too that just don't get looked at or get laughed off because of complete bullshit like this. Creswell may have wanted to say the superlatives for January. The fires currently tearing through the homes of entertainment industry professionals and a far greater number of ordinary Angelenos have embedded a torrent of outrageous comments that have multiplied with astonishing speed. Platforming it would serve no good purpose, but suffice it to say there's zero credible evidence that the fires have been set by eco-terrorists looking to draw attention to climate change, that the tragedy was fueled by massive budget cuts to the LAFD. The department's budget was trimmed a minuscule 2% last cycle. However, I would argue with that. How far does a cycle go back? Because I heard an expert say, this was from a fire chief in the US. I think he was a former Los Angeles fire chief or a fire chief in California somewhere. He was saying the effects of a budget cut aren't noticeable within the first, 2 to 4 years or something like that. It takes a decent period of time before the cuts catch up and you really start to notice the downturn in spending. Is that quote-unquote minuscule 2% last cycle? Does that go back a year or 2 years, 4 years? What is the period of time? Because if the budget cuts have been only 2% over the last 10 years, that does add up. Do I believe it's 2%? Not necessarily, no. Does that make me a conspiracy theorist? Because, I don't know this dude. Is he just going by the information that the LAFD public liaisons officer gave them? Or is there some more independent research that's gone into this? Even if they only cut the budget by 2% all over the United States, the government still has $52 billion of quote-unquote aid to give to Ukraine, which has come out lately that some rogue generals in the Ukrainian army have been selling the arms for profit. So, the whole system's fucking corrupt. What can you fucking do? The LAFPD's effectiveness has been hampered because it's too busy sending supplies to Ukraine, Donald Trump Jr.'s go-to, or that Governor Gavin Newsom's attempts to save a fish caused the water shortage, Donald Trump Sr.'s go-to. Okay, they're trying to discredit some of these conspiracy theories, and mainly the ones set out by the Trumps. Does that mean they're not true, or there isn't some truth to them? Because I've heard that from other people besides Trump, that a bunch of water was diverted to preserve some endangered fish species somewhere in a river or somewhere like that. And there is a lot of spending going to Ukraine. Like, they don't have enough money, to fix up schools and roads and stuff, all for emergency response in some of the areas affected by the hurricanes last year. But the Biden government seemed to have a lot of multiple $billion aid packages for Ukraine just lying around, and they were towards the end of his presidency. He authorized multiple $52 billion aid packages. I think there was like one every 2 weeks or something like that at one stage, which is absurd. I mean, even if it's only two of them, that's $100 billion out of the budget that you don't have for the people in your own country. Yes, the war in Ukraine is fucking insane, but it is a European war. It's not an American one. It is a grey zone. You can't say the government is 100% squeaky clean, which does give validity to the conspiracies. Are all the conspiracy theories true? No. Is there some truth to them? Probably. In this case, mismanagement of water. Yeah, it's a big thing because that happened with the fire departments in Australia too. Cutting funding. Some of the states cut funding right before the Black Saturday fires begun, and they paid the price for it. There's a whole bunch of aid concerts held just after it happened. Lots of money was raised, and then there was issues with that. The Red Cross was taking millions of dollars. I think they hoarded like $25 million of fucking donated money to quote unquote to hoard for disasters in the future, rather than going to the fire departments to buy new equipment because they were using some pretty old, outdated equipment. That's not all of them. There was multiple charities. One of them, I think Chris Hemsworth, said, don't give directly to the Red Cross. Make your donations directly to your local country fire services or Rotary clubs or places like that can filter the money down to the fire department so they can actually get the cash to buy the equipment they need. They brought water bombers and helicopters and new trucks and new equipment, and that money did go to the places it was supposed to. It wasn't hoarded by the Red Cross to pay a bunch of executives or workers or hoard it for a rainy day. Such dispatches from imaginary land haven't been limited to MAGA. Moderate Republic strategist Scott Jennings on CNN on Wednesday night somehow connected the devastation to DEI hiring at the LAFD. He was promptly shot down by the panel. Okay, I'm seeing a very anti-Republican stance in this Hollywood Reporter, and that's not surprising. It's the Hollywood Reporter, but I like to cover both sides. The Democrats didn't say anything conspiratorial, nor has the left been immune. Some upper middle class liberals in LA's entertainment community have quietly been raising the possibility of a Guy Fawkes arson plan, citing among other things Joe Rogan's often repeated story that a firefighter once told him, quote, "The right wind will one day blow through LA and destroy it." Yeah, was that firefighter wrong? Can't say he is. It's not out of the realms of physical possibility that something like that could happen. The perfect storm. It's a fucking Mark Wahlberg, George Clooney movie. Black Saturday, same fucking thing. The conditions were just right. This happens in Mother Nature all the time. You can't predict it. This firefighter, who has obviously had more experience fighting fires than any of us ever will, probably knows what he's talking about. Rogan told the story to Quentin Tarantino again last month, and the elites have seen it as some kind of dog whistle meant to cue and eat the rich attack. Though there's not a single shred of evidence to support the idea, Rogan just seemed to be playfully peddling doomerisms and gently trolling Hollywood as he always does. That's not a very fair assumption. I watched that episode with Tarantino and Roger Avery only a couple of weeks ago. I've seen clips of the fire story. I'm pretty sure I've seen that episode that's from a couple of years ago. There's a lot of shit that in this article that isn't reported. Joe Rogan wasn't doomerising or gently trolling Hollywood. He used to live in the Hollywood Hills. He said he's faced, 5 or 6 fires in his time when he lived in the Los Angeles Hills, and that was one of the reasons he moved to Texas, among other things. And if this guy bothered to report on that, it'd make a lot more sense. It also gives it a bit more context rather than trying to criticize and downplay Rogan's comments. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said the fire that convinced him to leave was one of the really bad wildfires a couple of years ago. He got home, there was an evacuation order. He was standing with his wife in the living room, watching the flames, was it like 60 to 100 meters away from his house burn, and they basically looked at each other and said, "Yeah, we're moving." I think he even lost a house once. He was talking to the firefighters there because he stayed to defend his property. The power had been turned off, and he was talking about how his Yeti Esky was still frozen. Yeah, like I keep saying, like with the Black Saturday fires here, you just need the right conditions. You just need it to be dry enough, have enough dead and dry kindling lying around on the ground. People have built in the bush and the hills for far too long. These houses are very close together. A lot of the modern ones are made out of very cheap flammable materials to cut costs. It just takes one fire. It doesn't even have to be a massive generational fire. It can just be a normal sized fire to spread through the hills, igniting the tinder boxes. Then all of a sudden, no pun intended, you have a wildfire. On Thursday evening, LAPD was working under a theory that the Kenneth fire was the result of arson and arrested someone who may have been connected. And a lot of the times with fire, arsonists aren't that far behind. And I think they should give those people life in fucking jail or just give them the death penalty. And once again, the Black Saturday fires, some of them were deliberately lit. They caused billions of dollars worth of damage. These people should be fucking jailed for life or have their hands removed so they can never fucking play with matches again. Who may have been connected? Have come with no indication of class warfare. Experts have long said arsonists tend to act out personal pathology, not political anger. This article is definitely trying to play down this class warfare aspect. I'm not seeing a huge amount of that. When it comes to the fires, I mean, it destroyed normal Angelenos' homes, as the article said, but plenty of rich, famous elites had their houses lost as well. The only difference is the wealthier people will be able to afford to rebuild and aren't going to be affected as much by home insurance companies not wanting to insure them because of the fire damage. That also doesn't mean that fires aren't being deliberately lit by homeless people or people who have nothing. Like I always say, we're always forced to view things in a black and white way, where I don't think the world is black and white. It's very much in the shades of grey. To say some lunatic who likes playing with matches is the only person or factor is a gross dumbing down of the situation. There's probably multiple factors that go into this, and like I said, I don't think any one of these theories yet is 100% right. I don't think anything can be ruled out or completely ruled in. That hasn't stopped some Hollywood types from spreading the theory in text threads and WhatsApp groups. Perhaps this is just established jitters in a post-Mangini world, but shows one thing the lure of conspiracy theory knows not from party affiliation. This is also trying to write off conspiracy theories altogether. I mean, as I keep saying, conspiracies happen every day. They don't always have to be some grand plan involving the assassination of a president or, covering up a UFO crash. And obviously, Mangini refers to Luigi Mangini. I will be covering that at some stage. That's a very interesting story. It also seems to have spooked the rich elites. I mean, they're not so untouchable anymore. I'm not saying I agree with the guy, but can anyone really say they didn't see something like this happening? These insurance companies and healthcare companies are fucking evil. At least there hasn't been much AI-generated deepfake action yet. And then again, when the canvas is that stark, harrowing scenes of apocalyptic destruction, you don't need to manufacture images to get your point across. You just caption the existing ones with the most seductive, outlandish ones you can find. That's also an irresponsible thing to say, because I've seen a couple of side-by-side comparisons of photos and then someone's added flames to it to make it look more dramatic. And I remember that happening even before the deepfake shit was even a thing. Going back to the Black Saturday fires again. There was a picture that was on a lot of newspapers globally of Australia. They had basically a satellite view of Australia and these gigantic orange fires, which was not true. There was also a more added smoke to the picture as well. They had the real photo, and you could see patches of orange fire spread out around the country, but it was digitally manipulated afterwards. People had added more orange glow and more smoke to make the fires look bigger and more devastating. Yes, they were obviously devastating, but in a country that fucking big, to see a big orange blob on a satellite photo, that would have to be an area the size of multiple states in the US, which, the fire was big in some parts, but it wouldn't look like that digitally, and it was proven to be a manipulated, quote, altered image made for dramatic effect, and I'm sure the same thing is happening here. I don't know why this guy is just trying to discredit the whole thing as, quote-unquote deepfake action. The altering of images for newspaper and news and archival historical images has been happening since photographs were invented. It's more prevalent in the digital age, obviously, but that's happened far before AI deepfake technology. And as I previously mentioned about the Hollywood sign on fire, if those images were real, that would be on every fucking newspaper on Earth, or at least in the Western world anyway. I would have seen it replayed on TV 50 times, but I haven't seen it on any of the news sources here. And that's the thing, something like that comes out, there's this picture of the Hollywood sign on fire. All you really have to do to try to get at least a 50% indication if it's real or not, just Google it. And if it's not popping up on every online news source, you should be able to determine that it's probably not real. Natural disasters have always attracted crackpots. Without the clear antagonist of, say, a terrorist attack, These events lend themselves to manufactured fictions, but you'd be right to suspect something has changed over the past few years. Back in 2005, Hurricane Katrina contained plenty of finger-pointing and calls for accountability, but the speed, scope and depth of the scapegoating is new. What started decades ago as an honest, if fervent search for responsibility in natural disasters has turned into something much more wild and malignant. The Maui fires in summer of 2023 brought a whole raft of nonsense theories about a direct energy laser, which tumbled into the Helene theories in 2024, and are now rolled up with the Southern California fairy tales about Ukrainian drones and Greta Thunberg secret orders. I have not heard of the Greta secret orders. I mean, she's a fucking conspiracy wrapped in a riddle, that one. And Ukrainian drones, I haven't heard about that either. Laugh at these inanities, but these theories often serve an end, especially on the right, to help politicians and movements score points with their bases. They are the lifeblood of a beast that must always keep its followers lathered up and a villain in its sights. Okay, interesting. Also pretty accurate, I think. What we are witnessing is nothing less than the weaponization of tragedy and exploration of personal pain for political gain, boosted by the social media optimized for outrage and a removal of its institutional guidelines, parentheses, hello meta. The leaders work the system to their agenda, whether that's loosening environmental regulations, the clear aim of the fish story, disbemusement of aid money, a real concern when Trump arrives in office in 10 days, or simply to sully a heated elected official on the other side. Solution seems scarce, especially as on the once robust public square of Twitter. Can you really call it a robust public square when it has been proven that it manipulated a lot of shit? The Twitter files, they deplatformed anyone with an opinion they didn't like. Now X, Elon Musk continues to throw open the hotel doors to misinformers. You know, it's not 100% true. There's community note things. I don't use X, so I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about, but they use a community note system, I'm pretty sure, to when people can kind of fact check things, and if there is someone, you know, sparking hate or something like that, the community more or less removes itself. You don't always need some institutional overlords making these decisions for us. And this is also the problem with articles like this, is that you're kind of assuming that everybody who reads this is dumb and impressionable and is going to just do anything or believe anything that is read. Half the shit I fucking read I don't believe. Half the stuff I see I don't believe. I've never 100% believed what's in history books. I play violent video games. I'm not out committing violent crimes. It's the same fucking thought process in this. It's this, we need to protect the innocent. We need to protect people who can't make up their mind. Sorry, if you're that fucking dumb and impressionable, you're going to believe fucking anything. You can't, that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Not everybody's like that. It's also saying that, you know, we're too stupid as a collective whole to use things like Twitter without some type of overlord, because that's been tried and it hasn't fucking worked. YouTube pulls people off for, you know, freedom of speech, basically. It's supposed to be this. YouTube pulls people off its platform every day. All these platforms do. They like to censor, they like to pretend they're about free speech and expressing ideas, except you have to express the ones that they find acceptable. If you present an argument that is different, you're either a conspiracy theorist, a loon, spreading misinformation whatsoever. It all comes back to that age-old question, who watches the watchers? Who watches the watchers of the watchers of the watchers? And just because the moderators aren't at Twitter, X anymore, doesn't mean that it's going to have a spike in misinformation. Most people are old enough to work this stuff out for themselves. Not everybody's as predictable and as stupid as this article likes to make out. University of Toronto political science professor Jeff Dancy, who has studied conspiracy theories for much of his career, has argued that conspiracy theorists are reacting more emotionally than intellectually. Interesting, which is why responding to them with facts generally doesn't work and might make things worse. The more pushback they get, the more it reinforces their sense something is being kept from them. Once again, conspiracies are a fucking 100% true. They're a part of everyday life. They've been around since there's been people. You can't just write them all off as being fake or being a theory when time after time they get proven to be true. People who have researched wildfires also say the events are uniquely suited to conspiracy theories. Lucy Walker, the Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker who made the landmark Wildfire movie Bring Your Own Brigade a few years ago, told me it's become almost an expected feature of these events. Quote, I've spoken to more survivors of wildfires than almost anybody because I spent several years making my documentary, Walker said. When I messaged her to ask about this, I was astonished the sane-looking people would start telling me insanely implausible conspiracies about alien light beams or any other of these absurd theories. Not always absurd. Fact is stranger than fiction sometimes. Some of it you can just explain with the fact that the algorithms promote contrary positions, she said, but I think it's also interesting to ask if maybe some people need protecting as they are really struggling with the absolute horror of this. Censorship is always for our good until the body bags start piling up. One example of this, communism. Once again, I've looked into all of these theories. I don't believe probably 90% of them, probably more like 80%. I have some knowledge of how fires work. I live in a country prone to bushfires. As I mentioned, I've got family members in the CFS. I'm not an expert by any means, but I do know how quickly and easily wildfires and bushfires can spread. Walker said that at least when it came to civilians, the benefit of doubt was due them. I guess I see that a lot of people are in shock, and grief and anger is famously one of the stages of grief and can lead to a tendency to blame. It is hard to absorb the truth of the big picture, especially when it is overwhelmingly inconvenient to face the fact that it is risky to live in these beautiful areas that we love so much. I hope that we can stay compassionate with one another rather than create more stress by name calling or pathologizing, however the fuck you say that word. Interesting, I do agree with that guy. A lot of really picturesque, beautiful places in the world are the most inhospitable to live. I don't think the hill should be packed with houses. It's asking for trouble. Could there be something more to the fires? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and look, maybe people are just looking for someone or something to blame to make sense of it all, to make sense of the situation. That's also a very real possibility. One would hope, but these theories have real-world consequences, and if public officials who's generally trying to solve a problem is done in by the Trumpian theory mob, or if such fancifulness is used to rally support for a reduction in aid, it's harder to see it as so benign. If there's some small comfort to be taken from all of this, it's that while the tools and speed are new, the motivations aren't. Ask any casual student of history about what caused the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Interesting. That decimated much of the city, and they'll come back with Miss O'Leary's cow, which knocked over a lantern and set the town ablaze. Yeah, look, sometimes the world's greatest disasters and tragedies have happened in very similar circumstances. The Great London Fire, same thing. Houses were built too close together. I think that started in a bakery. Someone burnt something and it spread and burnt down 80% of the city, killed thousands of people. The story is actually potentially untrue. The fire was started in an area near her barn, likely by someone else, and a reporter quickly admitted they invented the cow detail to make the story more interesting. And there you go. By that rationale, you could say media outlets as a whole are responsible for disinformation, not people on Twitter, as is the case with Miss O'Leary's cow. Stranger things have happened, so yeah, it's not a huge misinformation. The fire still started in the barn, but yeah, it's this creative liberty aspect that is the cause of the issue. So why isn't there more censorship placed on the media, especially in news? Why isn't there some type of oversight? They get things wrong all the time, and they're never held accountable for it. Yet some conspiracy theorist on X or YouTube is demonized and pulled off the site for opinions. And yet you have a quote-unquote news media professional making shit up about Miss O'Leary's cow, and there doesn't seem to be too many consequences. And that's the thing, like, who fact-checks the news? If they make a mistake, they just say, oh, so-and-so was caught doing this. Or rather, this so-and-so was caught doing this. There's no responsibility placed on them. Like, newspapers make up bullshit stories. Tabloids magazines, they all make up these like outlandish stories about celebrities. Oh, so-and-so, Harry and Meghan are on the rocks. The marriage is in danger, and it's complete bullshit made up to sell fucking papers. It all comes down to money, like fucking most things. What's more, Miss O'Leary was Irish, an ethnic group undergoing a demonisation in the city, and blaming her stated a populist need for a villain. She was the DEI hire of her time. Alas, with extreme weather disasters increasing and both the social media conditions ever more ripe for the stoking, these demonising theories will likely only intensify in the coming years. Bad actors creating havoc with false information, it turns out, can be a tinderbox too. Interesting. I don't agree with all of that, but it has raised some pretty interesting points. And ultimately, that's what we need to be doing, is forming up opinions based on the information at hand. So, interesting point of view. So going back to conspiracy theories, another one I've heard is the insurance agencies cancelling fire policies late last year. Only problem with that one is, yes, insurance companies are cunts. They always cancel policies, and a couple of months later, a natural disaster that they cancelled the month before happens, wipes out a bunch of homes, and then they refuse to pay. One that theory would kind of also rely on the insurance companies having access to very accurate weather data. I mean, I can't really remember the news ever getting the forecast right. They might say it's going to be 20 degrees one day, 30 by the end of the week. Week comes and goes, and they were off by about 8 degrees or so. The insurance company burnt down the hills only to save money on a policy they weren't going to pay out in the first place. Yeah, I don't know. One of the more outlandish theories I do find really interesting is this smart city theory. Now, a lot of it is just conspiratorial nonsense. Could I imagine an extreme left government pulling something like this off? This shit's been done in other countries, as I'll be going into in line of communism. Millions of people died for an ideology that the people who put it in place must have at some level known was flawed and corrupt, but yet they kept going. They changed an entire country because they kind of thought everybody was on board. Can I imagine a government in this day and age burning down whole areas to create a smart city? Yeah, it seems implausible and kind of far-fetched, considering it will cost billions of dollars to remake. And Californian government is pretty liberal. They're all about the environment. They want to have electric vehicles mandated by, 2028. They've got the Olympics, the Super Bowl, the rugby, the World Cup of soccer. They've got a whole bunch of international events coming up. Do they want to appear cleaner and greener? I think they're kind of going that way anyway. I don't think you need to burn down half of the hills to prove that point, and that would only cause more carbon dioxide and pollution. Going back to the Black Saturday fires, millions of tons of that was released into the atmosphere. Yeah, it does clear up after a while, but it does also create a lot of damage. That would also mean billions of dollars of new cars and resources, wood, bricks. They've all got to come from somewhere. So if you want LA to be green, that means somewhere overseas has to cut down a forest to provide the wood to build your new city, make the bricks and the concrete. That's all natural resources that come from somewhere. So maybe it's easier and cheaper, quicker and greener to just convert or modify the existing structures to a more economical system. I don't know, maybe just a thought. Especially when you have quote-unquote climate warriors like DiCaprio adding to the carbon dioxide output by chartering a private jet to fly to Mexico. And LA is much cleaner than it used to be. In the 90s, I used to remember the smog warnings you'd hear on the international news. They'd have days where you could barely see the city. It was just a haze. When I went there, it was fine. It seemed pretty clean. There's nowhere as near as hazy as it was, and there's probably more cars than there was in the 90s, cleaner cars now than there was back then. So isn't that environmental progress? It also seems to have more trees than the 90s as well. So the smart city is, it's an interesting theory. Can you really say the LA government would want to cause billions of dollars of damage just so they could build a new city within, 4 years for the Olympics that lasts 2 weeks? It'll be another decade before these areas are rebuilt to the way they used to be. And I don't see how destroying an entire area is good for rebuilding or, city or suburb planning. It seemed like it'd be the complete opposite. Like the Maui fires, I haven't done any research on that or anything, but have those areas been rebuilt? I doubt it. They're probably rebuilding. Some areas would be, obviously, but it takes years to rebuild any of this stuff. I know, like, with the once again, I keep referring to it, the Black Saturday fires, there's places that were affected by that are either been abandoned completely or have been rebuilt or in stages of being rebuilt or just as they were. I think the running estimate is like $250 billion to repair the damage. That's no small chunk of change. California's a wealthy state, but I don't think it could afford $250 billion just to rebuild and not have to sacrifice on other areas. And all for what? Tourists to come for 2 weeks for Olympics and the Super Bowl and things like that? Don't quite buy it. But it is an interesting theory. It's not really a conspiracy theory, but one of the theories I do find probably the most plausible is the mismanagement one. As I've outlined, a lot of disasters and things in everyday life come down to poor management, lazy or corrupt individuals or officials, piss poor planning and management, one of which being water resources. I saw an interview with the firefighter saying they went to fight a fire in an area and they turned on the hydrant and it was dry. I do tend to believe that one. I've heard from multiple sources that some of the reservoirs were bone dry. They stopped putting fluoride in the water, so they had to put covers on the reservoirs to stop birds shitting in them. Why not come up with a better filtering system? I've seen a satellite image of one of them being bone dry near the Palisades. That could have fought that fire, and firefighters saying they probably could have put it out if it was full and they had access to the water. So that one is interesting. I tend to believe that. I tend to believe what the firefighters on the ground, the guys actually fighting the fire, tend to say. Which also brings up the other question about, why not drain the celebrity swimming pools to fight the fire? I guess it's also logistics too. LA is a massive fucking area. They couldn't fly because there was too much smoke and it was too hot to put the helicopters into action. Same with some of the planes. Too much smoke you couldn't see. The last thing you want is a water bomber crashing and starting another fire. And that's happened here in the fires. An American crew was killed fighting the fires on Black Saturday. I think they dumped a load or it was uneven or something and it went down and crashed. It was absolute tragedy. So let's have a deeper look at the conspiracies about the water resources. This article is from capradio.org, titled Conspiracies Are Rife About Water and the LA Fires. Here's what the experts say. Published Tuesday, January 21, 2025. It's by Julia Simon, NPR. As massive fires continue to sweep through LA, firefighters are relying on a local water infrastructure not designed for fires of this size, researchers say. Fires in California have grown more explosive because of climate change, which is largely driven by humans burning oil, gas, yada, yada, yada. And yet prominent right-wing influencers and political figures, including President-elect Donald Trump, are falsely blaming the fire's destructiveness on the city not having enough water to fight the blazes. Well, that is a pretty crucial part of the firefighting process is water, unless you want to start dumping sand. Some online commentators are falsely saying water needed to fight the fires is instead going to pistachio moguls. Okay, interesting. Others are claiming inaccurately that there were, quote, bans on pumping water, and it's part of a plan by globalist elites to turn burned land into open-air prisons. California Governor Gavin Newsom has made a webpage to fact-check false wildfire narratives, much of them about the water. Open-air prisons. What does that mean? Does that literally mean an open-air prison like the good old days? Some conspiracy theories are just completely fucking retarded. And there's so many conspiracy theories now, they just muddy the water so you don't know what to believe. So if there is a legitimate conspiracy, the one that is backed up by tangible proof and facts, no one takes it seriously, listens or cares because of all this shit clouding the water. California has had a lot of issues with droughts before and water usage. Where I am, we had the same thing. About 10 to 12 years ago. You could only water the lawn on certain days. Don't water your garden more than twice a week, yada, yada, yada. If California had been in a drought recently, there might have been water restrictions. Still no excuse for not having enough water in the reservoirs. And yes, you can't predict a fire this big as just going to pop up in December in the middle of winter. No one can really predict what Mother Nature's going to do. You can't predict the weather, let alone accurately plan for it. But, maybe having excess reserves of water for quote-unquote rainy day situations isn't such a bad idea, especially in places like LA. We're finger-pointing away from the problem, says Stephanie Pincetel, Director of the California Center for Sustainable Communities at UCLA. We have really no lack of water. What we have is an infrastructure that is not made to fight cataclysmic fires, biblical-sized fires. A reservoir in the Palisades was empty while its cover was getting repaired, and the water systems used to fight the Palisades in Eaton fires couldn't maintain the continuous high water pressure needed, meaning water stopped flowing in some hydrants. Newsom has called for an investigation. I would be too. If that recover is getting repaired, that's not a good enough excuse in my book to empty the fucking thing. Where did that water go? It had to be emptied into another reservoir or some type of container, a vessel or tank of some kind. So, what happened to the water? And this is where you can get carried away with conspiracy theories, and, gives conspiracy theories some validity, because you can say, it's a cover up for something else. They're repairing this cover. Like, why can't they repair it in the water, or put a new one on, get rid of the old one, repair it off-site somewhere? Then where did the water go? The water had to go somewhere. And it just happens that one of the worst affected areas, the Palisades, didn't have any water in the reservoir, apparently because of this cover getting repaired. But water and climate experts say that even if the Palisades reservoir had been full of hydrants working perfectly, they wouldn't have allowed firefighters to change the course of the large wildfires. Hurricane-force winds fueled fires and meant that in the first days, planes and helicopters couldn't fly and drop water, experts say. Yes, that's the same thing happened in the Black Saturday fires too. The winds were so bad, the smoke and the debris, you couldn't get aircraft in the air. You could only use ground crews, which had limited resources and equipment to do the job. And ultimately, if you've seen some of those pictures of like the raging infernos from that day, where both sides of the road are on fire and trucks are just driving through it, there's really nothing you can do. The fire is so intense and so hot that the water in some areas was ineffective because it was so hot. It was drying up as soon as it was pretty much hitting the ground. It's destructive and incredible at the same time. So you'd need unlimited amounts of water to be able to control a fire of that ferocity. And I think, unfortunately, Mother Nature just proved the point once again. These municipal water systems were structured for residential and commercial needs and everyday fires, not firefighting on many fronts without aerial support, says Josh Lappin, a climate researcher at University of Notre Dame, who studies Los Angeles infrastructure systems. Trying to pretend that this system was built for this disaster is dishonest, he says, but is anyone claiming that it was built for disaster response? Reservoirs typically are used for drinking water, but in emergency situations, fires, floods, hurricanes, all resources usually go to the emergency response, whether that be drinking water or not, or a reservoir with or without water. It's all well and good for the experts to say the reservoirs weren't built for this type of purpose. Yeah, no shit, is anyone really disputing that? The issue is lack of water in reservoirs designed for drinking water. Here they were sending helicopters and they were sucking up the water from people's pools and backyards to dump on the fire. Russell Crowe let firefighters into his property. They emptied his pools and tanks. In that type of situation, any vessel with water in it is used to fight the fire, because if you don't, the fire's going to wipe out everything in its path. And yes, it was a biblical cataclysmic event. I don't think the government gets off the hook quite that easy just because the reservoirs weren't designed for natural disasters. Here's what we should know about the water situation in the fires. Does Los Angeles have enough water to fight fires? Los Angeles has access to more than enough water to fight the fires, says Mark Gold, Director of Water Scarcity Solutions at the non-profit Natural Resources Defense Council and a member of LA's Metropolitan Water District Board. Founded in 1928, I can say with great authority we have as much water stored as any time in the history of our agency, he says. Most local LA reservoirs have ample water in them, while Los Angeles has seen negligible rain in the last 8 months. The previous 2 years saw extreme rainfall. Okay, Quote, there's way more water in local storage than you could ever fight a fire with, says Marty Adams, former general manager and chief engineer of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. If you have so much water, well, then where the fuck is it? I know, like, in the moment it's hard to organise logistics and get shit because it's chaos, but in the aftermath, you think you'd be pumping water back into the empty reservoirs. If water pressure is an issue and the hydrants don't have water in them, then why didn't somebody turn on the pumps or something like that when this was happening? Why did so much damage take place? I'm just theorising. I'm not there. I'm not an expert. I don't know how the system works. It's just from an outsider looking in, you have to ask those kind of questions because when you watch this shit on TV, you don't have the emotional aspect of it. You look at it more logical. Like, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Why wasn't there water being pumped there or whatever? Or swimming pools being catapulted into the fucking hills or something like that. There's obviously more going on behind the scenes, but yeah, it just, like, when you look at things retrospectively or like through TV, it seems like a lot of logical things get missed, even though it's not the case in real life. Some of the false narratives about the lack of water for firefighting comes from Trump, who's blamed Newsom for not directing water to Southern California from Northern California. That is inaccurate and irrelevant to the situation of the Los Angeles fires, Gold says. Well, it's not irrelevant if the issue is around water and that statement is inaccurate. Why isn't someone saying, no, this is not a water issue, we have heaps of water, here's where it is. Some conspiracy theories about the lack of water for firefighting centre around the billionaire owner of the wonderful company, Stuart and Linda Risnick. The Risnick's companies include Fiji Water and Pom Wonderful pomegranate juice, and they are America's largest pistachio growers, mostly growing them in California's Central Valley. Yeah, maybe grow them somewhere else where there is more water. I don't know how much water pistachios need. It's a nut. I mean, they can't use that much. There was an issue here years ago with cotton growing. They were growing cotton in the outback of Queensland or somewhere like that. So they had to close off, the powers that be, the companies that own this place, lobby the government. The local government bypassed the water, which in turn caused huge ecological and environmental instability downstream, mainly in my area. Sent all this water up to grow cotton in the middle of the fucking outback. Cotton uses a lot of water, huge amounts of water that the outback doesn't have. Stands to reason, probably shouldn't grow cotton in the outback, maybe grow something a little more water conservative. But people do stupid things because they get paid a lot. Is this a similar situation? I don't know anything about this. It's the first time I'm hearing about it. Posts online which use anti-Semitic tropes and language inaccurately claim the Resnicks, quote, secretly seized control of all water in California. You'd have to have a lot of fucking power and influence to do that. I don't think even Bill Gates could do that because, the government's bribable, but when it comes to, securing vast amounts of water, there's going to be more pissed off people that don't have access to water that are going to be, potentially rioting and kicking down the doors of Government House if you passed something like that, or you made all the water disappear. Not saying this type of shit doesn't happen. I can imagine it happening in South America, but not quite sure about Los Angeles. But what do I know? Pinsdale says while the Resnicks have used a lot of California's water, that adds a little credibility to the claim. She says their water usage is distinct and non-germane to the problem of fighting wildfires. That sounds like an absolute bullshit corporate fucking quote. What the fuck does that even mean? So in other words, that means it's not related and separate to the particular issue of water reserves in California. You can kind of see how these conspiracy theories get off the ground where you do have a company like that is directing a lot of water away from use by tax-paying people of California, and it's being bypassed to grow pistachios. I mean, why not move to Oregon or somewhere like that, or Seattle, where it rains every day and you don't have to worry about buying or importing water? From a business standpoint, that would be a hell of a lot smarter and less wasteful, and it'd be cheaper. You could produce more pistachios at less cost. Quote, we have nothing to do with how the city of LA or any other municipality secures water to fight fires, says Seth Oster, Chief Corporate Affairs Officer for the wonderful company. Yeah, okay, that's probably true. What happened with the reservoir near the Palisades? And this is the one I want to know. One reservoir near the Palisades, called the Santa Ynez Reservoir, is currently empty during the firefight because the reservoir's cover is being repaired. To me, that's just not a good enough excuse. An operational reservoir may have meant firefighters could have saved more structures. I think that's more of a definite, not may have. If that was full, they could have put out a lot of the more fires in the Palisades. Says Michael Warra, who directs a climate and energy program at Stanford University and studies wildfire. Quote, but where were you going to save the neighbourhood? Probably not. No, you probably weren't going to save all of it, but you probably could have prevented it from being burnt to the ground. Completely. You could have saved a lot more and stopped it from spreading further. Still, some people have speculated that the reservoir was empty for nefarious reasons. On Fox News, actor and director Mel Gibson said, quote, I know they were messing with the water, letting water reserves go for one reason or another. In events like this, you sort of look, is it on purpose? Which it's an insane thing to think, but one begins to ponder whether or not there is a purpose in mind. Yes, and Mr. Gibson thinks along similar lines to me. I always think like that. There's probably a logical reason for it, but is there the possibility of some nefarious intent why anyone does anything? Because one universal thing at the moment is no one trusts their fucking government, and for good reason. It might have had something to do with a current global event. I'm not too sure about that one. While such views are inaccurate, according to who, there is a growing narrative that water was deliberately withheld from Los Angeles communities to increase the burn area. The false narrative claims that would then make way for 15-minute cities, an urban planning concept where your main daily needs are a close walk, bike or transit ride from home. There is a popular conspiracy theory that also came up in the Maui fires that a cabal of global elites want to clear land and use 15-minute cities as open-air prisons where they can control people. Okay? There might be a little bit of credibility to that. A couple of years ago when I was doing the Bill Gates shows, in the Bill Gates biography I used for that show, there's a chapter in it where he's talking about smart cities of the future where everything is going to be kind of like this, 15 to 20 minutes away. Public transport was going to be the dominant form of transportation. No one would own cars, or there'd be very minimal cars. You could walk everywhere. Everything was clean and green, and everything ran on renewable energy. I think it was a bit of a pipe dream at the time, but maybe it's not. Yeah, and clearing land is a good way to do that, but at the same time it damages everything. And people died during the fires too. It's not like these were empty houses. And all the environmental damage caused, I mean, that would negate the greenness and cleanliness of the smart city, because all the resources need to make it. And these green cities aren't that fucking green. Like, look at the damage to the climate that making electronics does. Like Teslas, yes, they might not run on fossil fuels, but they will use rare earth minerals, which just happen to all be in conflict zones, relying on basically slave labor to take them out of the ground, send them to one country to process, to another country to refine, to another country to finalise, to another country to make a battery, to import to the factory where they're being installed in the cars or the mobile phones or whatever. Green cities, like electronics, use so much more fossil fuels than cars and people do. Like, I heard a report that online gaming creates more greenhouse gas emissions than running your car for a year because of the demand for power. Game consoles get hot, they need to be cooled by a fan if you're going to be running them all day and night. The fat slob playing them needs to be cooled. All of our electronic gizmos are all powered by something. Electronic recliner, air conditioning, smart TV. Then this TV's another fucking drain because they're all the size of a wall now. The internet is the other thing. Having the servers on all the time is another huge demand that gets overlooked in the environmental argument. Running the servers, the internet router needs to be powered, and it all has to come from somewhere. It's not always about cars and coal and fossil fuels. We're also overlooking the biggest detriment to the environment, which is electronics. And quote-unquote our smart lifestyle, where you walk into your white fucking plastic house with the iPad on the wall that controls the climate, the lighting and all that shit. Older houses are far more environmentally friendly to modify and turn green than it is to burn down a whole neighborhood and then build green houses and a 15-minute city on it. But, who knows? I mean, this could be true. Who knows? We'll never ever know. And a 15-minute city would be a great way to control people, but how are you supposed to do that in cities like Los Angeles and New York, where it takes you 2 to 3 hours to get from one side of town to the other because of the traffic? Yeah, maybe that's the reason why, but who the fuck knows? What happens to fire hydrants during the fire? Yeah, this is also the other one I really want to know about. Some fire hydrants in both the Palisades and Eaton fires stopped working within the first 24 hours of the fires breaking out. It's convenient. We pushed the systems to the extreme. Janice Quinones, I think that's how you say her name. That might be one of the woke lesbians. DWP's chief executive and chief engineer said at a briefing last Wednesday, 4 times the normal demand was seen for 15 hours straight, which lowered our water pressure. Okay. Adams note that most hydrants and water systems are designed for structure fires and individual homes, apartment buildings or commercial buildings, and not large wildfires. No one's engineered for a fire like this, he says. Gold says a main hurdle was the high winds in the early days of the fire that grounded aircraft that could have dropped a lot more water. You can't fight wildfire of this scope and scale without any aerial support, Gold says. We had 2 communities that were basically sitting ducks. Yeah, interesting. Finally, why wasn't the Los Angeles water infrastructure prepared for fires? No city in the US or the world would have been equipped with on-the-ground water infrastructure to completely snuff out huge wildfires like this, says Greg Pierce, director of UCLA's Water Resources Group. Quote, firefighting, especially in environments like this, it's not about water, it's about especially aerial attacks, Pierce says, vegetation management, hardening homes for wildfires, and firefighting capacity. There's going to be a huge debate about how to rebuild systems, about who's going to pay for it, Pierce says. Yeah, interesting. And going back to the fires in Australia, they were all things looked at and talked about after the fires. Why didn't they have more of this? Why did they have more of that? And ultimately, it came down to not so much water, it came down to aerial firefighting capacity, trucks that could make it into very vegetated bush and scrubland to be able to fight these fires, and these trucks can only carry a finite amount of water. They're not quite as big as a Metro fire truck. They're like a four-wheel drive Isuzu truck. It's also true what he said about nowhere on earth is prepared to fight fires like this. They happen so irregularly. Well, they happen with more regularity now than they did 20, 30 years ago. But even in countries like Australia, you have bushfires every year, but most of the time they're managed and put out within a couple of days, maybe a real bad one a week. The Black Saturday fires, they were burning for weeks before they were even in an area that could be seen by humans. I think they started deep in the bush with lightning strikes, and they didn't see them until enough momentum had already been built up by the fire. So you can't really predict or plan for that. Maybe having more reserves in disaster response is the way to go. Maybe have a warehouse with extra fire trucks or, fire retardant on hand if you think it's going to be a bad year, or if you know it's going to be a really brutal summer and things are going to get dry, maybe start planning, bringing in extra water or something like that. But yeah, LA probably won't have a bad fire now for another 5 years. They're always going to happen, but like I said, we've had Black Saturday fires, we've had Ash Wednesday that happened in the 70s. That was the last real catastrophic bushfire. And then ultimately you don't have that type of data until enough time has elapsed. So you could say these fires may only happen every 20 to 30 years. We've had bad wildfires in between, but not to the degree we saw in Black Saturday. So let's go through some of the more over-the-top conspiracy theories, the ones that have been debunked and fact-checked. I found this on cbsnews.com, so take that how you will. Wildfire conspiracy theories are going viral again. Why? It's by Laura Dean and Ariel Desler, January 16, 2025. While investigators work out to find what caused multiple wildfires in the Los Angeles area, some conspiracies about the fire origins have spread on social media platforms. Posts about baseless theories ranging from celebrity involvement to secret government weapons have racked up millions of views. Despite fact-checking efforts, researchers say conspiracies of this kind regularly emerge after large wildfires, and we've looked at that before. I think that the more emotionally overwhelming it is, the more likely we are to just see high volumes of conspiracy theories to cope and make people feel like they have control, said misinformation researcher Abby Richards. Yeah, interesting. Directed energy weapons. Conspiracy resurfaces. Misleading videos have fueled false claims that directed energy weapons, often referred to as WEDs, ignited the flames. The conspiracy theory suggests that governments or secret organizations use lasers or microwave systems to ignite fires. Experts have repeatedly debunked these claims, attributing irregular burn patterns to natural factors like wind, terrain, and vegetation. Also, true, I mean, look, unless you're a fire safety officer or a fire engineer or something like that, you're probably going to have no fucking idea what the remains of a fire look like anyway, or what burn patterns mean, or if an accelerant's being used or whatever. While the US deployed and tested WEDs for military applications, interesting, such as disabling enemy drones or missiles, there is no credible evidence of the WEDs being deployed in civilian settings. I think that's kind of obvious. I don't think, why would the military test these weapons in populated areas or want to light fires? It seems a bit fucking over the top. The DEW theory, I think I called it WED before, surfaced during the wildfires in 2018, with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene claiming in a now deleted social media post that the fires could be caused by lasers from space. Okay, and online users spread the conspiracy during other disasters, including the Canadian and Maui fires and the Texas Smokehouse Creek wildfire in 2024. Most people will see this sort of stuff and completely reject it because it doesn't match with how they already view the world. But there are people who view the world through a conspiratorial lens, said Joseph Yuniski, co-author of American Conspiracy Theories. Don't believe everything you see on the internet or the news. Actually, I'd say believe less of what you see on the news these days. I view the world through a conspiratorial lens too, and I don't believe 80% of the conspiracy theories I hear. So to lump everybody in as being, gullible conspiracy theorists, I think is a bit disrespectful. Claims the weather is man-made. Interesting. Claims have circulated that the government could have geo-engineered rain to stop the Los Angeles wildfires. In an area like Los Angeles, like here, you cannot have rain for months. So, yeah, the natural climate, I think, is probably responsible for that and not the weather. Theories that the government have some control over the weather have surfaced after several natural disasters, including hurricanes Helene and Milton. Meteorologists and agencies, including the Natural Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, have debunked these claims. I've also heard that Disneyland pays planes or helicopters or something to, what do they call it, put chemtrails or magnesium or something, some type of chemical particle in the atmosphere to make it rain during summer. So people have to buy an umbrella or a poncho so they can make more money. That one's pretty funny. I think that's completely fucking over the top. It probably costs more to get the chemicals and cloud seed than they would make through revenue of, a $10 poncho and a $20 umbrella. People blame the government or company executives because it's easier than facing structural problems like drought conditions. Jeff Dancy, a political science professor at the University of Toronto, told CBS. That is more attractive to people that are desperate for order amid catastrophe, he said. The US Government Accountability Office said in December assessment on cloud seeding that at least 9 states are using the technology, which is, quote, primarily funded at the state level or below, and there is little federal intervention. Okay, interesting. So that does look a little bit more credible now. There is actually cloud seeding going on. I thought that was just a conspiracy theory. I didn't know anyone actually did it. Interesting. I'll have to look into that. For cloud seeding to be effective, the atmosphere around Greater Los Angeles would have required more moisture in the clouds for water vapor to be condensed. Kasia Frederick, a cloud physics expert and professor at Colorado University of Boulder, told Politico Fact. Quote, the LA area is currently so dry that there is not enough water that you could condense, Frederick said. Land grab conspiracy. This one's interesting. Another unfounded claim shared on social media suggested Southern California wildfires were started to clear land so officials could make way for what they call smart cities aligned with United Nations goals. Yeah, fuck the UN. The UN's agenda to cut global emissions includes making cities more sustainable. In the Los Angeles area, Smart LA 2028 initiative suggests renovating the city's transport system, among other technological changes to make the city greener, but the plan does not involve mass demolition or rebuilding. Yeah, like I said, I think it would cost more money for rebuilding and insurance and lawsuits than it would just retrofitting the existing houses. And, the older houses look much better than the new shit anyway, so why would you want to destroy the aesthetic appeal and history of your city? This conspiracy also gained traction after wildfires in Maui, when a video of Hawaii's governor was clipped, taken out of context and shared to bolster the false claim the state was aiming to create a smart city on scorched land, and smaller theories were debunked after wildfires in Canada and Spain's Canary Islands. Yeah, that annoys me when, quote-unquote real conspiracy theorists clip or modify videos, then put it out there and claim, see, this is proof so-and-so was planning this all along. I was right. Then when you see the original clip and it's like nothing, it has nothing to do with that at all. The media often does that. They will show you a clip or a quote some celebrity said doing something. It's taken out of context and everyone thinks that person's a monster. And all it takes is a small clip or a quote from someone saying or doing something, and people are ready to jump on the bandwagon, grab their pitchforks, and go after this person with absolutely no proof behind it whatsoever. Celebrity crime cover-up conspiracy. This one sounds like a good one. Some posts that reached millions of people on TikTok falsely claim the wildfires are sparked to destroy evidence in the sex trafficking case against Sean Diddy Combs, falsely claiming his mansion was consumed by flames. And really, on the grand scale of things, Diddy is a fucking nobody. If he was working for the government or if he is just some type of sick pervert, he would not have enough power to fucking start a wildfire that took the lives of 25 people just to burn down evidence in his house. His houses in New York and LA. I mean, I think he lives in New York. I don't think he is an LA guy. I think he's always been on the East Coast. He'd have multiple houses all over the country, all over the world probably. He's been in jail for several months, like 6 months or something at this point. Do you think the FBI haven't already gathered all the evidence they need against him? Do you think there's going to be boxes of fucking photos or incriminating documents or photographs of anybody just lying around the house that hasn't already been collected? Yeah, that seems a bit ridiculous and completely over the top. In reality, Combs' mansion remains intact outside the evacuation zone as of January 16. His home was raided in March by federal agents, okay, so it was more than 6 months ago, on the property, and people reported the home was listed for sale in September. False claims about celebrity homes also appeared in the Maui fires, with some users sharing baseless claims Oprah Winfrey helped start those fires. I've also heard that Mark Zuckerberg was like in his bunker or something like that, and all those tech billionaires who have houses out there, they were all hiding down in their panic rooms or something. So how the fuck would anybody know that? Unless you're physically there with them, you would never ever have access to that type of information. They're not putting it out there. It's just completely ridiculous. Addressing the spread of conspiracies. By coincidence, on the day the wildfires started, Facebook announced it was ending its third-party fact-checking program and loosening its automated systems that police policy violations, instead relying more on users to report issues before they take action like they used to. Yeah, back in the old days when you could say that, and then if you said something stupid, you were outed by the community. I think the community filtering itself out, like how it works on X, is probably the better way than the overlords of the tech companies deciding what is and isn't appropriate. The platform is adopting a crowdsourced community notes. See, that's what it is, community fucking notes. System similar to Elon's X. Dancy said conspiracy theories are benefiting from the information revolution we live in. It's an attention economy and conspiracy theories get attention, he said. He advocates for regulating social media algorithms that prioritize sensational content. Yeah, but they've tried that and they went too far, because they always do. You couldn't say anything about certain subjects without automatically getting flagged, whether it was fucking true or not. That is a complete gross manipulation of the truth. Richards, who wrote a thesis about climate conspiracy theories circulating on TikTok, agreed, quote, "You're fighting against algorithms that are designed for profit and not for creating a well-informed and healthy society," she said. One conspiracy, well, it's not really a conspiracy, I think the person I'm most critical of is Gavin Newsom, but then again, I've only got my information from the news and podcasts and what I've heard on the conspiracy circles. So let's have a look at Mr. Gavin Newsom to see if he is or isn't somewhat at blame for this, because I think he has to take responsibility. Ultimately, he is the governor after all. The buck does stop with him. If he's not going to take responsibility, no one is, and then nothing's ever going to change. The governor and the mayor are responsible for what happens in their state, and if they're not going to take responsibility for the fires, even though they're not to blame for them, they didn't go light the fires themselves. Well, some people might think that, but ultimately they need to take responsibility the same way Scott Morrison needed to take responsibility for the Black Saturday fires, instead of making excuses that his family needed a good holiday in Hawaii while the country was on fire. So this comes from my favourite news source, Reuters.com. It's titled LA Mayor, California Governor criticised over fires as political clash ensues, by Nathan Lane, published January 10, 2025. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass came under sharp criticism for her response to a series of raging wildfires on Thursday, while President-elect Donald Trump sought to blame California Governor Gavin Newsom for the deadly disaster. The criticism fanned by Trump and his allies across social media, Trump is getting a lot of blame for spreading these conspiracy theories, has triggered a political clash over the two massive wildfires menacing Los Angeles from the east and west. At least 5 people have died in what has developed into one of the biggest natural disasters in the state's history. The mayor, who was on an official trip to Ghana when the fires broke out on Tuesday, faced questions about her internal absence, given that the National Weather Service of Los Angeles began warning about extreme weather conditions last week. Bass, who was sworn in as mayor of America's second most populous city in December 2022, has sought to deflect criticism. I bet she has. Leadership, and on Thursday did not answer questions from reporters about her decision to leave the country. Yeah, that's a fucking big one. ScoMo did the same thing. And that also brings up the question, why the fuck was she going to Ghana? Why would a California mayor have anything to do with the inauguration of a president on the other side of the world? It seems a bit weird. Yeah, if it's a president, yeah, I could understand, but a mayor of a fucking city, it doesn't seem as important as a president going to another president's inauguration, but that's probably some of the story I'm missing with that. Quote, my number one focus, and I think the focus of all of us with one voice, is that we have to protect lives, we have to save lives, and we have to save homes, Bass said on Thursday's briefing. Rest assured that when that is done, when we are safe, when lives have been saved and homes have been saved, you're just reiterating what you just said. So, that's supposed to show the people that you actually care. We will absolutely do an evaluation to look at what worked and what didn't. It's probably going to be a lopsided list. The fires struck at an especially vulnerable time in Southern California, which has not seen any significant rainfall for months. They were fanned by unrelenting Santa Ana winds, consuming 31,000 acres, 2,500 hectares so far, an area more than twice as large as Manhattan. Trump fans' political flames. In social media posts on Thursday, Republican Trump took aim at Bass and Newsom, both Democrats, for what he described as quote, gross incompetence in dealing with the fires, a broadside he repeated later that day from his Mar-a-Lago resort. Quote, both of them are stone-cold incompetent, Trump said. In 2019, during his first term as president, Trump criticized Newsom's forest management that he said had contributed to devastating fires. This week he criticized the state's water management policies and social media posts the governor and officials dismissed as false or misleading. Going back to the fires for the 50th time, in Black Saturday, that was a big factor, was forest management. A lot of states said you couldn't take firewood or broken tree branches out of national parks anymore. A lot of people who had fireplaces would collect wood by going for walks in the bush, getting broken branches that come down during the winter storms last year, collecting sticks they could burn. And you couldn't do that because they might be an endangered fucking tree beetle that's decided to make its home there. Yeah, I'm all about conservation and respecting the environment, but when you see the damage these fires can do, it seems completely ridiculous that picking up a branch is going to have that devastating effect on the environment, when we all know what happens when a devastating wildfire goes through an area. It burns fucking everything, kills and destroys everything in its path. But yet you can't take that stick out of the national park because something might be living under it. And like I said, I love animals and insects and all forms of life, but the endangered tree beetle can go find another stick to live under, if that's going to be the outcome. Quote, "One of the best and most beautiful parts of the US of America is burning down to the ground," Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform. "It's ashes and Gavin Newsom should resign. That's all his fault," he wrote, misspelling the governor's name in an apparent jab. Duh, that's kind of obvious. Mayor Bass's office did not immediately respond to the request for comment. Newsom's director of communications, Lizzie Garden, accused Trump of politicizing the disaster. "The governor is focused on protecting people, not playing politics, and making sure firefighters have all the resources they need," Gordon said in a statement. Trump ally Elon Musk and a number of other conservatives joined the pylon, seeking to blame the disaster in part on diversity programs that tend to be promoted by Democrats. There is no evidence to support their claim that such programs impacted the effectiveness of their response. Musk, a billionaire tech mogul, called Bass, quote, "utterly incompetent" in a post on social media platform X that received 23 million views. In a separate post, the baseless accused city official of prioritizing diversity programs over, quote, "saving lives and homes." You could make an argument for that because you have these 3 lesbian fire chiefs, or whoever they are, in charge of, fire resources, and then, how can you get rid of firefighters, which apparently that happened. There was firefighters who had told they were supposed to be on standby or something that got told to go home, rather than authorising overtime pay or something for them. Then you have a fire chief that says, "Well, don't you want people like us turning up to your door?" So wouldn't really care who turns up at the door if the house is on fire and I need saving. I want someone who can do the fucking job. And this is the same person that says, "Well, if your husband," I don't want to hear the physical debate, "if your husband's stuck in the house that's on fire, well, he shouldn't have been there in the first place." That's just an irresponsible and stupid woke thing to say. There's unedited video proof of her saying that. So, yeah, maybe Elon has a point. All right, we're coming to the end of our look at the fires. There's just one more theory I wanted to look at. And one conspiracy for the fires that hasn't really been touched upon much or even mentioned in most of the news services I've seen, especially news on TV. I found this article by random chance while doing the research for this episode. This theory is right in everybody's face. It's hiding right in plain sight, and it's part of the aesthetic of Los Angeles, and that is the millions of palm trees in LA. Did LA's palm trees help spread the fires or accelerate the spread? That's what we're going to have a look at. So to find out more, I've gone to another one of my favourite news sources, theguardian.com. There's an article titled "Conspiracy-Laden Fire-Prone Icons. What Will Happen to LA's Palm Trees?" Many palm species in the city are receptive to embers, hard to extinguish, and probably helped spread the fires. Interesting. Yeah, I don't think anyone would think that a tree could help spread a fire. I mean, obviously trees burn, but palm trees aren't exactly the standard tree. Because I know gum trees here in Australia take a lot to burn and to catch fire. I mean, they're in an environment where fire is part of like the ecosystem. So they're used to being burnt and growing back. And a lot of them don't burn to the ground. They have very tough, hard wood. It takes a while to burn. And when it does burn, it usually comes back and forms this crusty, cool-looking bark. But palm trees are kind of a different thing. They don't really have they don't really have branches. They have these palm fronds that stick out of the top. So let's get into the article. It is by Victoria Namking, written on the 24th of January, 2025. When the Los Angeles wildfires broke out on the morning of the 7th of January, some of the most dramatic images were a palm tree set ablaze along Sunset Boulevard. Yeah, when you think about it, we've all seen the images of palm trees on fire. I don't think there's too many people that would have thought that the palm trees that are so iconic and recognizable about LA might have actually helped spread the flames that burnt large areas of the city to the ground. So that is very interesting. In the days that followed, burning palms became a symbol to illustrate what may be the costliest wildfires in history, which left 25 dead and destroyed thousands of structures. The trees are icons of the city. They also played a role in spreading the flames, researchers and fire officials say. While a deadly combination of factors caused the fires, many palm species are fire-prone. Yeah, interesting. I did not know that. And difficult to extinguish. Once ignited, poorly maintained palms which have which have dead, dry material under the canopies, are notorious for being receptive to embers, the primary cause of structure loss in wildfires. In high winds, small chunks of burning fibres or large fiery fronds can travel long distances. Yeah, interesting. That's also another theory of how the fire might have spread and started in multiple areas. We have two fires in separate areas starting. Burning ember that travelled, a couple of kilometres down the road may have hit some dry material and started. And then people think it's the government using DEWs or whatever, or in fact it could have just been burning palm frond fibre. And I got a massive palm tree in my backyard. It's been there forever. It's fucking huge. It's probably like 40 feet high. It's got these massive fronds on it. They get big clusters of these palm date things that drop off. And like a bunch of them weighs like 40 or 50 kilos. Like if that fell off, it'd fucking kill someone. The other thing I noticed about them is they don't really drop branches like normal trees when they dry and die. The palm fronds just kind of dry out and just hang there. And you got to get a fucking palm saw, got to stand on the tank, cut them down. And when they come down, these things are not light either. They're like probably 10 to 15 kilos, completely stretched out. And the other thing about them is they burn really fucking quickly. I had to cut one up once and I put it in a chimenea. And I had the chimenea going and I just jammed it into the top. Within 30 seconds, the thing was probably less than that. It's probably like 15 to 20 seconds. There was like a flamethrower coming out of the top of the chimney. It was so intense. It made this horrible noise and it fucking scared the shit out of me. I thought, fuck, I'm going to like burn the backyard down if this thing like burns and then falls into the grass. And there's all the fibre around, I don't know, the harder parts. There's like these hard parts, the lorikeets and stuff like to land in and pull apart. There's like this big seed thing. I think that's the seeds of the palm nuts before they mature. The lorikeets and the bees love them because they're full of nectar. They split them open and there's all these like husks all over the ground. It's right underneath my gym. So some mornings it's covered in like little seed pods and this dried bits of yellow pollen and flour and stuff. Similar to like a peanut husk, like a shell of a peanut, and the kind of the stuff inside of that. So if any of that was on fire and started flying through the air, I can completely believe that could start fires miles away from where the actual tree is. If you set the bottom of the tree on fire, there's so much dry material there, and those things, palm fronds are fucking huge, burns really, really easily. I gave my partner a bunch of cut up dried palm and they used it for kindling, and they barely had to put any newspaper in the fireplace. They just lit the dry palm stuff and it goes up so fucking quick. So if you have a city that's got millions of these things, millions of these tall tinder boxes, most of them happen to be around power lines and power transformers and stuff like that. They're all pretty much near buildings and people's homes. You have gigantic fire torches along all this infrastructure all around the city. So I can completely believe that one would go up, send the burning embers to the next one, and so on and so on. And that's probably what caused the fires down in Malibu, coming down the hill. Set the tree on fire. I heard it crossed the road pretty quickly, which, once again, is probably those dried embers. But I'm probably just talking shit. I don't know really what I'm talking about. So, continuing with the article. Quote, one Mexican fan palm found its equivalent to a whole branch getting caught in the wind and moving. And when that gets caught on a roof, under an eave, or any other flammable material, that's much more significant than a pine needle or a sycamore leaf. Interesting. It's also, like I said, like those palm fronds can be like 20 fucking feet long. That catches on fire, gets underneath the house or a power line. Said Esther Margolis, however you pronounce her name, a landscape architect at University of Southern California, UCS, professor who specializes in climate and wildfire resilience planning. Quote, unfortunately, it makes logical sense that they help spread the fires. Research has shown that Southern California's palms, which are all non-native except for the California fan palm that grows in the desert, quote, go up like Roman candles when embers hit dead fronds. Palm trees have also ignited because of lightning strikes, power lines, fireworks, and arson. Interesting, the plot thickens a little. The Los Angeles Fire Department says palms should not be used in known fire hazard severity zones. Yeah, and with the dry conditions, the winds and the fire, you have, like she said, Roman candles spread out all through the city, just waiting to go up. But not all palms are created equal. One that is intensively maintained and healthy may not catch fire like a palm in its natural conditions, where it has a big skirt of fronds hanging down. Yeah, that's like the one I've got in my yard. The dry ones always tend to hang down below. They don't really seem to be the top ones. They're always towards the bottom of the tree, because even with the saw and the ladder, I can't reach the top of the tree. It's too big. All the ones I've cut off in recent years all seem to be the ones on the bottom of the tree. So yeah, interesting. That has fueled wild conspiracy theories. The plot thickens again. Although thousands of palm trees have probably caught fire this month, some images of unscathed palms located next to destroyed homes stoked false claims about the fires being intentionally set by the government to initiate a land grab or to stop development of China-funded high-speed rail. That's another theory I didn't really go into. Going back to the Black Saturday fires again, there was gum trees that were literally in the middle of an inferno that weren't touched. There was people's properties that were burned down, and there'd be a tree. Everything around it is burnt and black, and there's this what looks to be like a perfectly healthy green tree just in the middle of the paddock, and everything else is completely decimated. And I think it's more to do with the intensity of the fire. It burns hot and fast, and it goes through an area. So if something is green and healthy, it tends not to burn, or not to burn as quickly as something that is dried. Then all the fuel's being burnt out, and it keeps on going looking for more fuel to burn. Like I said, I'm not a fire expert, so don't take my word for it. The real reasons why some palms don't burn are varied. The way they were pruned, how much moisture the tree had internally, and the unpredictability of wind patterns all affect flammability. If the tree was stressed or leaking resin from a previous wound, that could play a role too. Generally, healthy trees are less likely to ignite. Yeah, I've heard that with the pine trees explode or something when the sap comes out of it. The resin, it's highly flammable and apparently explosive. The future of LA's palms. Meanwhile, the fires are shining light on another palm tree problem. It's hard to imagine Los Angeles without its celebrated palm trees. Yeah, it would be a much different landscape without the palm trees, especially in Snoop Dogg videos. But that could become a reality as they are under threat from fires, disease, pests, aging, and the fact that they are wildly impractical in the sprawling city that desperately needs more cooling benefits than palms can provide. They are also dangerous even when the city is fire-free. Residents have reported heavy fronds with thorny spines falling from 80-plus foot heights, breaking roofs, tiles, piercing car windows, and narrowly missing people in the process. Yes, I can attest to that. Although the one that I've got doesn't have huge spikes on it. It has, I wouldn't call it thorns. It's kind of more like a sawtooth kind of a pattern. You can hold them without gloves, but you don't want to grab them too quickly. You kind of have to slowly maneuver your hand in. The fronds themselves, like the long palm fiber things, tend to be a bit sharp too. The ends of them have kind of a pointed tip. But why doesn't California grow gum trees? I mean, they're great for the heat. They're big. They create a lot of shade. They're drought tolerant. Many palms were first planted in the LA area in the 18th century by Spanish missionaries who used the fronds in religious services. By the early 1900s, they were used as decorative plants by the wealthy and real estate developers who marketed the city as a tropical paradise. Yeah, interesting. Don't quite picture LA as a tropical paradise. It's got too much of a dry heat for that. The 25,000 trees planted in advance of 1932 Los Angeles Olympics and the additional 40,000 that were added as part of the New Deal's Works Progress Administration are now considered senior citizens. Tree experts say it's never a good idea to plant so many of the same species, simultaneously because of pests, disease, and the fact that they will age out at some time. A 1990 city tally estimated that there were 75,000 palm trees on city streets, but it's unknown exactly how many are left standing, especially after the latest wildfires. A UCS study of an urban area near downtown LA found that 12% of the city tree canopy consisted of highly flammable palms. Interesting. I thought there would be a lot more palm trees than that, to be honest. I thought there was millions of them. Palms are more like grasses than trees, and they have been called out by environmentalists for their high water usage, inability to store large amounts of carbon dioxide, and lack of shade. The Canary Islands date palm, seen throughout the Beverly Hills and Hancock Park neighbourhoods, is one of the palms that can create a valuable shade canopy. But because of the tree's potential dangers and high cost, a mature one costs upwards of $20,000 fucking dollars. Wow. Which is why some have been stolen in the past. They are unsustainable. How the fuck do you steal a fully grown tree or a half-grown tree? That's insane. I used to work at a beach, and they had these 9 big palm trees in the middle of the square. This is like fucking nearly 20 years ago. They were heritage listed. They had been there for like nearly 100 years or so. And they gently took them out, laid them down with these giant cranes, put them in these big Hessian bags, took them off, brought them back 3 months later or 6 months later when the square was finished being paved, and put them back in where they still stand today. That's interesting that a desert plant requires so much water. Reading this has made me think of that scene from the first June with the burning palm trees, where Paul talks to the guy whose job it is to give them a few spoonfuls of water to keep them alive. I hardly ever water the one out the back, but then again it's right underneath a water tank, and the water tank overflows and drains out all around the bottom of it. But yeah, I didn't know that. I thought because it was in the desert that it didn't need much water at all. Interesting. No one knows exactly when the palms will die, but when they do, some streets will have zero shade. Oh, yeah, makes a hot area even fucking hotter. I'm a big tree lover. I got a street that's full of trees. The trees are so dominant in the street, they cover up the lights. So when you drive down my street, you can see maybe 2 or 3 little bursts of light coming through the trees, and the rest of them are being completely covered up. It's one of the darkest streets in the entire area. The city or county of LA, which already has limited resources for maintaining its urban forest, will need to remove a significant volume of 100-foot tall palm trees to be processed, disposed, or upcycled. I am sympathetic to the aesthetic history of LA, and I'm not of the mind that we should eradicate palms for the entirety of our landscape, but we should be more selective where they are used, said Brian Vija, Master Arborist and Associate Director of Community Forestry at Tree People, an environmental non-profit. They shouldn't be used on streets where we need to mitigate some of the heat island effects. People have strong opinions about the compositions of urban forests, with some believing LA should only plant native trees. Others say to only plant trees from the world's hottest and driest places. Vija believes we can do both and advocates for replacing the majority of the city's palms with native oaks, desert willows, and Tyon, not sure what they are, as well as extremely drought-tolerant non-natives such as the Chinese pistache. Of course, that would change the look and iconography of the city, but perhaps that's the point. LA advocates argue should look more natural with a canopy that provides more benefits to all Angelenos. It's unlikely that palms will disappear entirely. Homeowners and developers will probably continue to plant them on private property despite the threats to and from them. The city has committed to maintaining palm trees in areas with historical significance such as Hollywood and parts of downtown, but otherwise is focused on planting climate-resistant species and creating an adequate urban forest. Quote, most palm trees have never been a good solution, says Margulis. We need to change the perception of LA. When it comes to living things, we really should have a deep respect for the trees that are native and indigenous to this area and really will thrive here. Interesting.
G'day. Don't skip. Let me interrupt the podcast that you're currently listening to with some blatant self-promotion. What do you get when you mix 2 Aussie mates, a splash of booze, well, more than a splash, and some microphones? You get Cheers Big Ears, hosted by myself, the Chad, and my mate, Matt, and sometimes, but more often than not now, my missus, Bobby. It's a podcast of adult beverages and not-so-adult conversation. It's not serious, far from it. Well, except for that one episode, but that was just that one. We're available wherever you get your podcast fix. Cheers, Big Ears.
So what do you think caused the fires? Is it just a tragic freak event caused by Mother Nature or DEWs or some other nefarious reason? I think it's Mother Nature and poor management. But what do you think? I did find the article on the palm trees very interesting. It seems likely that could be a legitimate reason why the fire spread. And unfortunately, we'll probably never really know what caused them. I don't think it was anything too nefarious. I think, California is drought prone. It's dry. Not much rainfall, poor management, the right winds, the right fire. I think that's probably the most logical explanation for it. But then again, what do I know? What do you think? All right, and with that brings us to the end of the show. A big thank you to everyone who listened to the end. If you'd like to support the Truth Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Head on over to the Facebook and Instagram page, give them a follow and a like. You can download your favourite episodes and listen to them on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Pandora, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. To your friends, to your family, tell anyone you think might like the show. Help spread it around and get the word out there. Truth Tank merch store should be open pretty soon. I keep saying that, but I keep getting fucking sidetracked. You can also rate and review the show. Each rating helps the show get found and move up the ranks. I'd be very appreciative if you could take the time to write a review if you're enjoying the show. But until then, I'm a Tank. This is the truth. Truth to tell.